She's not over you, she's just too proud to admit she lost you. And the silence, that's not strength, that's regret choking on ego. Now understand this deeply. When a woman is drowning in regret, the first thing that rises to the surface isn't love, it's pride. Pride is loud. Pride is defensive. Tells her, you dare reach out. Don't let him think you miss him. Don't admit you were wrong. And the stronger her feelings once were, the stronger that internal battle becomes. Because admitting regret isn't just about missing you, it's about admitting she misjudged you, mishandled you, or let something valuable slip through her hands. You have to realize something about human psychology, especially in attraction dynamics often discussed by coaches like Corey Wayne. Emotion and ego rarely move in the same direction. Her emotions may be pulling her toward you, replaying memories, remembering how safe she felt, how grounded you were, how different you were from the rest. But her ego is pulling her away, whispering that reaching out equals weakness. That texting you first means surrender. That admitting she misses you means she lost control. So, what does she do instead? She goes silent. She acts composed. She pretends she's fine. She may even look peaceful on the outside. But peace and pride can look identical from a distance. The difference is internal. Real peace feels light. Pride feels heavy, and regret under pride, that's suffocating. The mistake most men make in this phase is misreading silence as indifference. They assume if she cared, she would say something. But when pride is involved, silence doesn't mean she doesn't feel. It means she feels too much and doesn't want to expose it, especially if the breakup or distance challenge her self-image. If she walked away, she has a narrative to protect. Reaching out threatens that narrative. And here's the deeper layer. Regret grows in private. It doesn't announce itself publicly. It shows up at night. It shows up in comparisons. It shows up when she meets someone new who doesn't carry your steadiness, your edge, your emotional presence. Pride might stop her from calling you, but it cannot stop her from remembering you. This is why your reaction matters more than her silence. The moment you chase, plead, or try to force clarity, you relieve her of that internal pressure. You give her ego relief. But when you remain composed, grounded, and self respecting, you allow that internal conflict to intensify naturally. You don't punish, you don't react. You simply step back into your strength because the truth is, pride can delay regret, but it cannot erase it. And when emotion finally outweighs ego, silence becomes heavier than reaching out. When you disappear with dignity, something powerful begins to happen beneath the surface. Your absence stops being empty space and starts becoming emotional pressure. Most men think presence creates attraction. They believe constant communication, constant reassurance, and constant effort will make her value them more. But attraction doesn't grow in overexposure, it grows in space. And when you stop chasing, stop explaining, and stop trying to manage her perception of you, you give her something rare, silence that forces reflection. Reflection is uncomfortable when regret exists because when you're no longer there to distract her, she has to sit with her own decisions. She replays conversations, she rethinks arguments, she analyzes moments where she may have overreacted or underestimated you. And here's the key: absence removes emotional noise. When you were present, she could justify things, she could test you, she could measure your reactions. But when you're gone, truly gone, not playing games, but genuinely focused on your life, there's nothing left to push against. That's when the contrast hits her. If you remain calm, disciplined, improving yourself, and not reacting emotionally, your silence starts to speak. It says, I know my value. It says, I don't need to convince you. And that message is powerful because it's not spoken, it's demonstrated. This is something often emphasized in the teachings of Corey Wayne. Attraction is about emotional experience, not logical arguments. And your absence creates an emotional experience you cannot ignore. Space magnifies memory. The human mind romanticizes what it loses. Small flaws fade. Strong qualities become amplified. The way you carried yourself, the way you handled stress, the way you didn't crumble under pressure. When she can no longer access that energy, it becomes valuable. Scarcity creates significance. And here's the psychological shift: when you chase, she feels chosen but not challenged. When you withdraw respectfully, she feels the possibility of losing you permanently. That possibility triggers something primal, the fear of finality, not drama, not chaos, just the quiet realization that you might not come back this time. That's when regret deepens. But this only works if your absence is authentic. If you disappear but secretly stalk her, wait desperately, or put your life on pause, that energy leaks. Emotional strength is sensed even from a distance. True absence means you redirect your focus toward growth, purpose, health, friendships, and momentum. You're not withdrawing to manipulate, you're stepping back because you refuse to overextend where you're not valued. And that shift changes everything because when she sees or hears through subtle channels that you're steady, improving, and unaffected on the surface, it unsettles her expectations. She may have expected you to panic, to chase, to prove something. Instead, you gave her space, and space makes emotions louder. Your absence doesn't beg, It doesn't argue, it simply allows her to feel what life is like without you. And in that silence, regret echoes the loudest. Never confuse silence with blindness. Just because she isn't speaking doesn't mean she isn't watching. When a woman is drowning in regret but too proud to reach for you, observation becomes her safe outlet. It allows her to stay connected without risking vulnerability. She may not text you, she may not call, but she notices. She pays attention to patterns. She listens for your name in conversations. She checks social media even if she tells herself she doesn't care. Curiosity is often the first visible symptom of hidden regret. Understand this: when pride blocks communication, it doesn't block awareness. In fact, it heightens it. Because now she's trying to answer a silent question inside her mind: did I lose something valuable? And the only way she can measure that is by watching what you do without her. If you fall apart publicly, complain, post emotional messages, or appear stuck, it eases her internal tension. It confirms her decision, it protects her ego. But if you look composed, focused, evolving, and grounded, it creates cognitive dissonance. Now, the story she told herself about you starts to crack. Now she has to confront a new possibility that you weren't the problem she convinced herself you were. This is why quiet strength unsettles more than emotional reactions. Coaches like Corey Wayne often emphasize that attraction grows when a man remains centered in his purpose. And purpose is attractive even from a distance. When she sees you progressing, maybe physically stronger, socially active, career focused, emotionally stable, it forces comparison, not just between you and other men, but between you now and the version she left. Regret feeds on comparison. She might scroll through your updates casually at first, but then she notices something different. Your energy seems lighter, your posture seems stronger. There's no bitterness in your expression. That calm confidence begins to challenge her pride, because pride can handle anger, it can't handle indifference. If you appear genuinely at peace without her, it forces her to question whether she miscalculated your value. And here's something subtle: when she watches and sees no sign of desperation, she begins to feel the weight of uncertainty. What if he moves on? What if he meets someone better? What if I was replaceable? These thoughts don't come from insecurity alone. They come from realizing you're not anchored in her orbit anymore. That's when curiosity deepens into emotional tension. But this only works if you're authentic. You're not performing growth for her attention. You're growing because you refuse to stagnate. There's a difference. Real improvement carries a different energy than staged happiness. And people can sense that difference even through a screen. When she sees that you didn't collapse, didn't beg, didn't chase, but instead leveled up quietly, it disrupts her expectations. She may still remain silent. She may still protect her pride outwardly, but internally the narrative shifts. Now she's not just remembering you, she's reassessing you. And when observation turns into admiration mixed with regret, silence starts feeling heavier than reaching out. At the center of her silence is a quiet war between emotional safety and ego protection. One part of her wants reassurance. One part of her wants to hear your voice, to know you don't hate her, to feel that familiar connection again. But the other part, the louder part, is guarding her pride, because reaching out doesn't just risk rejection, it risks exposure. It risks admitting she still cares. When regret exists, vulnerability feels dangerous, especially if she was the one who pulled away, ended things, or acted indifferent. If she hurt you in the process, then contacting you forces her to confront guilt, and guilt is uncomfortable. It's much easier to protect ego than admit, maybe I was wrong. That sentence alone feels like surrender to someone who is pride driven. So instead of reaching for emotional safety directly, she waits. She hopes time will soften things. She hopes maybe you'll reach out first so she doesn't have to risk her dignity. Because if you initiate contact, she can respond without losing face. But if she initiates and you respond coldly, that would wound her pride deeply. And pride always tries to avoid situations where rejection is possible. This is where most men misunderstand the silence. They assume it means indifference, but often it means fear: fear of rejection, fear of losing leverage, fear of looking weak. Emotional safety requires vulnerability. Ego protection avoids it at all costs. And this dynamic is something often discussed in relationship psychology circles, including teachings associated with Corey Wayne. Women are drawn to emotional strength, but they also test emotional security. If she senses that reaching out will lead to punishment, bitterness, or I told you so energy, she will retreat further into pride. But if she senses that you are calm, grounded, and emotionally centered, her fear slowly decreases. You see, she doesn't just need to miss you, she needs to feel safe missing you. There's a difference. If you reacted angrily, attacked her character, or burned the bridge, her pride will dig in deeper. But if you handled the separation with composure, wished her well, and stepped back without drama, you planted a seed of emotional safety. Now her internal battle shifts. Instead of thinking, I can't text him because he'll attack me, she thinks maybe he'd respond calmly. That possibility softens resistance. But here's the paradox: you cannot try to create safety by chasing. Safety isn't built through pressure, it's built through consistency and emotional control. The more stable you appear, the less threatening it feels for her to drop her guard because pride protects against humiliation. When humiliation feels unlikely, pride weakens, and slowly the emotional side grows louder. She begins imagining the relief of reconnecting, the comfort of hearing your voice, the simplicity of clearing the tension. But still, she hesitates because the first move feels like stepping off a cliff. Your job isn't to push her, your job is to remain steady enough that if she jumps, she doesn't feel like she'll fall. And when emotional safety finally outweighs ego protection, pride starts losing its grip. There is something deeply unsettling about a man who doesn't break when expected to. When she walked away, pulled back, or chose distance, part of her may have anticipated a reaction. Maybe she expected long messages, emotional explanations, attempts to convince her to stay, or visible signs that you were shaken. That expectation comes from experience. Many men respond that way. So when you remain composed, measured, and grounded, it disrupts her internal script. Strength creates doubt. Not loud strength, not arrogance, not cold detachment, but quiet, controlled, self assured strength. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself when you continue living your life, pursuing your goals, improving your health, sharpening your focus, and maintaining emotional discipline. If it forced her to reassess the story she told herself about you, if she convinced herself that you were too attached, too dependent, or too emotionally invested to function without her, your stability contradicts that belief. And when reality contradicts narrative, regret begins to grow. Because now she must confront a new possibility. Maybe you were stronger than she gave you credit for. This is where psychology becomes powerful. Attraction is heavily tied to perception. Coaches like Corey Wayne often stress that a man's centeredness is magnetic. When you remain unshaken, you communicate high value without saying a word. And high value is always more appreciated in hindsight than in comfort. Comfort can create complacency, but distance reveals significance. When she sees that you didn't spiral, didn't lash out, didn't beg, but instead elevated, it challenges her assumptions. She may have assumed you would always be there, emotionally available, regardless of how she treated you. When you demonstrate boundaries through action, not threats, it changes the emotional equation. Now, she isn't just missing you, she's questioning herself. Did I misjudge him? Was he more solid than I realized? Did I walk away from someone rare? Those questions are uncomfortable because they shift responsibility inward, and self reflection is far more painful than blaming someone else. Your strength also removes pressure. When you don't chase, she doesn't feel controlled. When you don't react, she doesn't feel attacked. When you don't plead, she doesn't feel superior. Instead, she feels uncertain, and uncertainty fuels curiosity. Curiosity fuels reconsideration. But this only works if your strength is genuine, if you're pretending to be unaffected while internally obsessing. That tension leaks into your behavior. Real strength means you've accepted the outcome. You're open to reconciliation, but you're not dependent on it. You're building regardless, and that independence is powerful because it communicates abundance, not abundance of women necessarily, but abundance of self-worth. It tells her you don't need validation to function. You choose connection, you don't require it. That realization shifts the power dynamic entirely because when she recognizes that losing you didn't destroy you but sharpened you, regret becomes sharper too. And strength has a way of making someone reconsider what they thought they could easily replace. Regret by itself doesn't automatically lead to action. Many people live with regret quietly. They feel it, they think about it, but they never move on it. The difference between silent regret and a message popping up on your phone comes down to one thing: emotional safety mixed with attraction. Pride can hold the line for a long time, but when the emotional weight becomes heavier than the risk of reaching out, something shifts. At first, she tells herself she's fine. Then she tells herself it's too late. Then she tells herself you probably don't care anymore. But if you've handled yourself with strength, composure, and quiet confidence, those assumptions start to weaken because your behavior matters even in absence. The way you upsetted, the way you didn't burn the bridge, the way you didn't attack her publicly or privately, all that builds a silent foundation. If she believes reaching out will lead to humiliation, rejection, or emotional chaos, she won't do it. Pride will win. But if she senses that you're grounded, not bitter, not desperate, not waiting, her fear decreases. And when fear decreases, courage increases. This is something often emphasized in the relationship philosophy of Corey Wayne. Attraction must feel safe to be expressed. A woman won't lean toward a man she perceives as unstable or reactive. Even if she regrets losing him, she needs to believe that reconnecting won't damage her self respect. And here's the subtle truth: the message, when it comes, is rarely dramatic. It's not a long confession of regret. It's not always an emotional apology. Sometimes it's simple. Hey, how have you been? I was thinking about you.
Wow.
Small words, low investment, because she's testing the waters. She wants to see your tone, your response, your emotional temperature. This is where everything you've built internally gets tested. If you respond with sarcasm, bitterness, or emotional overload, you confirm her fear. If you respond with calm, warmth, and strength, you reinforce safety. The goal isn't to reward her immediately or punish her, it's to remain consistent with the man you became during the silence. Understand this clearly. Her pride delayed her, but her emotions brought her back. And emotions don't return where they feel unsafe. They return where they feel understood and respected. That's why your absence was powerful. That's why your composure mattered. That's why you didn't chase, because chasing relieves tension, silence builds it. And when that tension matures into longing mixed with safety, action becomes possible, not guaranteed, but possible, because eventually silence becomes heavier than risk. And when reaching out feels less painful than wandering forever, regret turns into action.